Hello, I'm Pranav Garimella, Chief Medical Officer at the American Kidney Fund. I'm excited today to be joined in conversation with longtime colleague and friend Dr. Vasishta Tatapudi. Dr. Tatapudi is a transplant nephrologist and Associate Professor of Medicine at NYU Langone and an integral member of the NYU transplant team led by Dr. Robert Montgomery. The team has conducted several groundbreaking kidney transplants over the last few years, and today Dr. Tatapudi is here to discuss recent developments in xenotransplantation, a procedure that involves transplantation into human recipients organs from a non-human source. Let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Tatapudi.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. Nice to see you today.
All right. So the idea of transplanting non-human organs has been around for quite a while, but there's been palpable excitement the last few years, especially in this field. But before we go into the details, could you give us a brief overview of your background and experience in the field of human kidney transplantation that's led us to where you are here today?
Yeah, so I'm a transplant nephrologist and an associate professor of medicine at NYU Langone Transplant Institute in New York City. So what that means is that I take care of patients with kidney disease, and my focus is on working with our transplant surgeons to take care of kidney transplant candidates, as well as kidney donors and recipients of kidney transplant. So as you said, I'm a member of our research team here, led by the chairman of our surgical department, Dr. Robert Montgomery. And, we've been able to conduct several pig-to-human kidney transplants over the last 3 years. And I believe that these transplants have now paved the way for the first clinical trials that may eventually lead to FDA approval of the use of pig kidneys to cure end-stage kidney disease.
That's fascinating. Thank you. So what exactly is xenotransplantation and why do we need to consider it as an option as compared to traditional human-to-human transplantation?
Yeah, as you mentioned, xenotransplantation involves transplanting organs from a non-human animal source into humans. And the question of why is really relevant. There are about 80,000 patients in the United States on the kidney transplant waiting list. And in fact, there are over 500,000 patients with end-stage kidney disease. Many of them are not healthy enough to be even considered candidates for kidney transplant. But the problem is that of critical organ shortage. And even though there are nearly 100,000 patients on the waiting list, in the US, we only do about 25,000 kidney transplants every year. So there's a supply and demand mismatch of epic proportions. So as a result, many patients either die waiting for a kidney transplant, or some of them, while they're waiting for a kidney transplant, their health declines and they have to be taken off the waiting list. So, at 5 years after being put on the waiting list, half of them either die taken off the waiting list, or they're still waiting for a kidney transplant. So that's really the unmet need that we're trying to address with xenotransplantation.
Those are some sobering statistics that you present and really, make us understand why we need to look at alternative options. So perhaps that could be the next segue into outlining what the significance of this FDA approval is for first clinical trials of genetically modified pig kidney transplant in humans.
Yeah, so the recent FDA approval for the first clinical trials of genetically modified pig kidney transplants into humans, I believe it marks a significant milestone in the field of xenotransplantation and transplantation in general. It represents a critical step forward in addressing the crisis of organ shortage, and it could potentially provide an unlimited supply of organs if some of the research that we at NYU and other groups are doing works out. And so the aim of these trials will be to assess both the safety as well as the efficacy or the ability of these kidneys to function as expected. And potentially they could pave the way for broader clinical use in patients with end-stage kidney disease.
So you brought up the point of safety and efficacy. Clearly, there is a need. What do we know about the potential efficacy or benefits and the risks associated with xenotransplantation?
Yeah, I think I've certainly talked about the benefits. There's thousands of patients waiting for a kidney transplant that are in dire need of these transplanted organs. Um, so that's pretty clear. There are certain risks and unknowns involved at this time. The first among them is whether these kidneys will perform similarly to human transplanted kidneys. Um, and physiologically, sometimes there could be mismatches between species. And as a result, there are some unknowns with regards to physiologic function that we still need to address. And that's, I think, where these clinical trials will be really impactful. We will be able to test some of these questions in the early patients and then tweak our protocols and also the genetic engineering constructs of these pig kidneys and perhaps even the immunosuppressive drugs to make these kidneys work better and almost mirror what we see with human transplanted organs.
That's fascinating to hear. You've touched upon some aspects of safety and efficacy, but what do you see as key challenges that need to be addressed, given what you know from the prior work that you've done that's led to this FDA approval?
I think we've come a long way in the last 2 or 3 years since we've begun doing pig to human kidney transplants. And some of the work we've done, in fact, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of the seminal work that has been done by researchers, nephrologists, and surgeons over the last 2 or 3 decades to bring us to this point. What all of this science has led to is improvement, steady improvement in the ability of these kidneys to work for longer periods of time. And so our goal now is to ensure that we're able to sustain the kidney function, not just for months, but potentially years in living human transplant recipients. And for us to be able to do that, we have to ensure that the human immune system isn't attacking the pig kidneys and causing a rejection. That's the effort of the transplant community right now. And our approach to achieving that goal is essentially twofold: by tweaking the genetics of the pig kidneys, by genetic engineering techniques that are now available, and also adjusting the immunosuppressive medications that suppress the human immune system and prevent a rejection. So that's, I will believe, the biggest challenge that we're facing right now. But there are other things to consider as well that we have to be cognizant of and be mindful of, like the chance or potential for transmission of infections from pig to human. So we have a team of researchers as well as infectious disease physicians who pay close attention to that. We screen the pig source, animal source, from where these organs are being procured for infections, as well as the recipients and everyone who comes into contact with these patients for any potential pathogens, so that there's no chance of spread of infection from pig to human.
So clearly, there's a lot of work that goes into not just evaluating patients, but also where the organs are coming from and what the likelihood of the match is. But that's the science of it. There are also the challenges of the ethics of xenotransplantation and how that's viewed. Uh, do you have any thoughts on what the ethical considerations are in this field?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are ethical, religious, as well as cultural concerns, if you will, that are important considerations in xenotransplantations. And so we engage regularly with experts in medical ethics, religious leaders, and also leaders in the community, and discuss these questions both at our institution, as well as I'm sure this occurs at other institutions where pig to human xenotransplantation is being pursued. But I think if you want a more pointed answer, really these pigs are raised humanely in laboratories and in farms, where we follow strict guidelines that are set out by regulatory agencies. And also, if you think about it, there's a long-standing precedent for the use of pig-derived products in humans, like, as I'm sure you know, including blood thinners, insulin for a really long time was sourced from pigs. Pig heart valves are used for valve replacement surgeries pretty routinely. So there's certainly a precedent for using pig-derived products in humans. But you're right. There's got to be ongoing engagement with all the stakeholders, patient advocates, ethicists, religious leaders, as well as animal rights groups. All of this is going to be essential to take this field forward.
Fascinating. So speaking about taking this field forward, I'm wondering if we can take a step back and ask you, what are the key milestones that you've achieved in your prior work that's actually led to this FDA approval for clinical trials of pig transplantation?
Yeah, as I've said before, I think where we are now is really a culmination of all of the efforts of numerous researchers, surgeons, and nephrologists over the last 3 decades who've done a lot of preclinical work in animal models of pig-to-human transplantation. But I think some of the work we've done here at NYU in the last 3 years, as well as other groups, notably in Alabama and in Boston, some of the work that's been done by these individuals, both in brain-dead individuals, as well as xenotransplantation of pig organs into living human recipients in the last year or so, have, I think, brought us to the precipice of these clinical trials now. So I would say this work has been ongoing for nearly 3 decades now, and we're now at a stage where we could potentially translate this into the clinic.
That's wonderful to hear. So perhaps this specific trial, can you give us an outline of what the specific trial and its endpoints will be and how long it'll take to reach them?
Yeah, the trials that have been greenlit by the FDA in the last month or so essentially aim to evaluate the safety as well as the efficaciousness of these pig organs in living human recipients. The primary goal is to determine whether these organs will function just like human organs, or at least close to human organs, their immunologic compatibility with humans, and as well as, we aim to test out the best strategies to prevent rejection of these organs by the human immune system. And ultimately, I think this research seeks to provide a sustainable solution to the organ shortage crisis.
Absolutely, that's good to know. So where can people go to learn more about xenotransplantation, or even specifically this trial, and if they can participate or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are a lot of resources that are out there in the public domain. The FDA, or the Food and Drug Administration, puts out a lot of information that's available on their website that defines xenotransplantation, that talks about some of the science that underpins xenotransplantation. Your organization, the American Kidney Fund, as well as the National Kidney Foundation, has a lot of details about both the safety as well as the promise of xenotransplantation. And certainly our institution also periodically puts out information about the progress we've made in xenotransplantation. These are all great resources. And specifically about this clinical trial, there are a couple of clinical trials, as I've mentioned, that have been greenlit by the FDA, that are sponsored by 2 separate companies. And they put out press releases that are publicly available, which will provide some information about these trials as well. And eventually, I think, I'm sure there's a lot of interest in the public domain, patients, physicians who are caring for these patients. They can certainly reach out to us or other hospitals that are doing some of these earlier trials if they want more information.
Yeah, absolutely. I have patients that I see in clinic who are often asking about xenotransplantation and whether or not they would qualify for it. So perhaps I'll close out with a couple of last questions rolled into one. So, what is your hope for the field of xenotransplantation, and how has your experience been on this ride so far, really leading this cutting edge technology?
Yeah, my hope really is that one day these organs will work as effectively and safely as human kidney transplants. And that will allow us to really put a dent in the kidney transplant waiting list. And, I'm a nephrologist, so I'm talking about kidneys, but my colleagues in cardiology and hepatology, these are physicians who are taking care of patients with heart disease, liver failure, pulmonary or lung failure. It's possible to translate some of the success uh, to positively impact these patients with other types of organ failure as well. And, to provide a sustainable alternative or at least an additional option to patients with organ failure. That's my goal.
Yeah, it's amazing to see nephrology leading the way and the potential for translating this across different organ systems. This is my last question. Are there any other thoughts that you have or anything else that you'd like to talk about that we've not discussed today in the field of xenotransplantation?
Yeah, I think, thanks for the opportunity to get the word out there. I've been taking care of transplant patients for about a decade now, and I've seen patients really benefit from transplantation. It's life-changing. A lot of these patients who are on dialysis are able to come off of dialysis. Some of these patients who are dreading going on dialysis can avoid going on dialysis. They're able to go back to work. Um, but the problem has always been our ability to not offer this option to all of our patients, everyone who comes to our doorstep with kidney failure because of a tremendous shortage of organs. And, again, I would say my hope is that if this is successful and these clinical trials um, are successful, this gives us a potential short shot at addressing this long-standing crisis of organ shortage. And for me personally, to work with a group of motivated individuals, this is a team effort. There's surgeons, there's nephrologists, there's infectious disease physicians, there's pharmacists, and of course, really caring nurses who take care of these patients. I think that's really been the one of the greatest privileges of my career so far.
Well, that's really exciting to hear, and we're hoping that this trial and other work that you're doing is met with just as much success. Thank you so much for your time and insights today. It's been fantastic talking to you. This is an area of kidney health that the community is closely following, and we really appreciate you providing this update. So thank you all, and I really encourage everyone to stay connected with the American Kidney Fund by visiting the website kidneyfund.org and following us on our social media channels. Thanks so much.
Thank you.